Tonight, we'll hear from 10 of the Democratic presidential candidates as they take the stage for the second set of debates. The two-night event held in Detroit will feature senators like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders tonight. Tomorrow night's debate will have the 10 other 2020 hopefuls like former Vice President Joe Biden. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in Detroit with what to expect from the debates.
We want to make change in this country. It's got to be big, structural change.
On her way to Detroit last night, Elizabeth Warren stopped in Toledo, Ohio, to tout her economic plan. Her rally came a day after Bernie Sanders traveled to Canada to make the case for his Medicare for All proposal.
We are going to take on the greed and the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry.
The two liberals are hoping to take a bite out of former Vice President Joe Biden's lead. Biden, who takes the stage tomorrow night, has vowed to turn up the heat after facing criticism for his record on race.
Do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America.
Last week, Biden said he won't hesitate to defend his political history.
I was probably overly polite in the way I didn't respond.
And in Detroit yesterday, Senator Kamala Harris was asked about Biden's vow not to be polite at Wednesday's debate.
My mother raised me to be polite, and I intend to be polite.
Democrats are debating in Michigan with the hope of winning it back from President Trump, who won here in 2016 by fewer than 11,000 votes. But voters here tell us they want candidates to focus on the issues.
Something that's not just, I'm not Donald Trump. I want to know about what their plans are for reducing student debt.
There are things like the environment.
To me, healthcare, because it's through the roof.
So Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Detroit. So Ed, sort of first basic question, what can we expect from tonight's debate?
Well,
go where you want with that.
Talk about the open-ended question, because we never know. This much we know. 10 candidates on stage. The two headliners are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Do they, two sort of ideological brothers in arms, brothers and sisters in arms, go at each other, or sort of stand firm together and defend their far more liberal proposals compared to the 8 other lesser-known people that will flank them on stage? People like Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, John Hickenlooper, all of whom are trying to break through into that sort of first tier that are in the double digits in this early polling. It is likely that we'll see some of those other folks try to make hay of Sanders and Warren's proposals, especially on health care, on the economy generally, and raise questions about whether the country can really afford, both economically and politically, to take the steps that they would like to take. So tonight might actually be more of an academic exercise in the sort of the ideological spread of the Democratic Party. We'll see. The subplot I would say to watch tonight is the two people standing to the left and the right of Sanders and Warren, and that is Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke, the two young white guys in this race who, frankly, are also trying to break through. They're if you look at our recent polling, you'd put them in the second tier, high single digits, trying to break through and have a moment as well. For Beto O'Rourke especially, he had a terrible first round of this in Miami last month. If he can't come up with something tonight that gives him momentum, he could very well sort of slip into obscurity by the fall. Pete Buttigieg, who has more than $25 million in the bank, probably is able to hold on through early next year, but he too has to prove that he has staying power and somehow, for example, build up his support among Black and Latino voters who so far aren't really giving him any love.
And so I'm looking at all the people, I'm looking at my computer here, I'm looking at everyone else that's on there, and sort of the other big name is Amy Klobuchar.
Right.
What is she going to have to do to sort of stand out in this crowd, though?
She, too, has to somehow raise concerns about the more liberal policies of Sanders and Warren. She has cast herself as a moderate from the Midwest and believes that the party has to win back places like here in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and you don't necessarily do it with the proposals that Sanders is putting forth. She's someone who holds up pretty well in these debates because she's quite good at one-liners, and she's somebody who has spent years on stages like this. So we'll see. And it should be, again, a really interesting contrast in the ideas and the styles of these candidates.
So the former Vice President Joe Biden is going to be on stage tomorrow night. We all remember, his first time around on the debate stage, his performance, he took a bit of a hit. So we've got a new Quinnipiac poll out. It shows Joe Biden ahead with 34% of likely Democratic voters still leaning towards him. How substantial is this for him? Because I know he took a hit after the first round of debates, but he seemed to have sort of claw his way back a bit.
I think, Anne-Marie, it just speaks to the fact that it's still quite early in this race. Most Americans are not paying attention and, frankly, can't name a Democratic presidential candidate much beyond Joe Biden. Maybe they remember Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but that's about it. And that's perfectly normal, and that's fine. And frankly, talking to people here yesterday, we were reminded of this, that they're not paying attention, they don't care yet, the field is too crowded. They'll pay more attention when it winnows down, maybe in the fall or early next year. That's normal. And so Biden continues in some ways to benefit from the crowded field and the fact that there are too many people for most Americans to really take stock of. At the same time, if he has another rough go of it tomorrow night, those that monitor this race far more closely, the Democratic primary voters who go to events, who donate money, who show up and stand outside theaters for some reason at 7:30 in the morning for a candidate, they're the ones that are going to notice that something is up with Biden and that maybe there are concerns about whether he can hold up and really be the party's nominee. So it's critical, these performances, for everybody. You see it in the money they can raise, in their standing in the polls, in their ability to draw out crowds and hire staff. Everybody knows that these are really critical moments, whether you're a well-known name or a lesser-known name.
Right. So you're in Detroit. You've been talking to voters. I saw a little clip from the governor there, and the governor said, listen, what the people in Detroit want them to talk about are the things that impact their day-to-day lives. They want to talk about jobs, the economy, fixing the roads and the bridges. Are you finding that to be true as you talk to voters?
Totally, totally. They're not interested in cable news catnip. They are far more interested in what you're going to do for us. I thought the guy in our piece who says, don't talk to us about how much you're not Donald Trump. Talk to us about what it is you would do if you were elected president. Democrats learned that lesson to great effect last year, and it helped them win back control of the House of Representatives. Democratic presidential candidates know it as well. They struggle sometimes to really be able to focus on the issues as they try to break through, but they understand that that's what they've got to do in order to win over support. The party knows that. We'll see after these first few debates if they really start focusing in on that a little more. But it's hard. Look, the president dominates the discourse in this country.
Yeah.
He's done it to great effect. And they know that they have to respond sometimes to what he's doing or saying, and then somehow pivot and talk about the issues they'd like to talk about. And with 25 of them running, it's really incredibly hard to break through.
Yeah, that's so true. So listen, before I let you go, there's been a bit of a shakeup at the DCCC, that is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, last night. Tell us what happened. What's going on there?
Yeah, so this is the entity, Anne-Marie, that is responsible for getting House Democrats elected or re-elected to essentially win and hold the majority in the House of Representatives. Each of the parties in the House and the Senate has one of these campaign arms. They raise millions of dollars to help candidates. There's been a brewing controversy for the better part of this year at what's called the DCCC, or the D-Trip in Washington, because they aren't, frankly, employing enough people of color at a time when the Democratic caucus is a far more diverse group of people. And there was concern that they were not necessarily paying attention to those issues that are important to Black, Latino, and Asian voters, and the staff was predominantly white. This isn't a big issue. Diversity is, for House Democrats especially, because so many of them hail from the big cities, from parts of the country that are predominantly Black and Latino. The head of the group right now is a congresswoman from Illinois, Sherry Bustos. She is white. Most of her staff was white. She ran into a buzzsaw with the Black and Hispanic caucuses, who said you are not properly representing the caucus and the country. In response to several embarrassing news reports in recent days, her top 5 senior staffers quit last night, and she's got to restack that place at a time when most of the attention and the money is focused on the presidential race. It'd be hard to see how she's able to rebuild and rebound from this. But it speaks to part of the fight that we see at the presidential level as well. Where should Democrats be fighting this contest? Do you come back to these industrial states and focus on mostly white, blue-collar workers? Or do you double down on a strategy that builds up turnout in the cities and the suburbs, where you're more likely to find younger, Black, brown, Asian voters and somehow win that way? Remember, Trump only won here in Michigan by less than 11,000 votes. And the argument that Democrats make is, if we'd only found about 11,000 people in the city of Detroit or its suburbs to show up and vote for Hillary Clinton, the story would be different potentially. Same goes for Pennsylvania, where he only won narrowly. If we'd run up the score in Philadelphia or in Milwaukee, where they lost in Wisconsin. And that argument, do we focus on the industrial states where it's mostly an older white voting base, or do we focus on, states in the South and in the West that are predominantly driven by Latinos and blacks? That's the argument you're going to continue to see throughout the course of this campaign. It's part of the reason that Joe Biden continues to face questions, for example, about his civil rights past, because it speaks to that concern that maybe the party should be looking for a black or Latino candidate instead of a white guy. Be interesting to see how this goes. That's a long answer, but all of this just speaks to the tension the Democrats are facing, and it's something that we'll continue reporting on because it will be so evident to us as the campaign continues.
A long answer, but a good one. I was hanging on every word. Ed, thank you very much.
Well, at least somebody was. Thanks, Henry.